Hello and a very warm welcome to the very first episode of the Ideas Factory in this new year. We wish you all a very happy new year. I'm Naghma, and joining me on this episode of the Ideas Factory is Professor Pant. Well, as the world stepped into the new year, 2022, we also saw the entry of a new variant of COVID 19, the Omicron. And as the world was heaving a sigh of relief that the infections due to COVID 19 were probably decreasing, the world was opening up, the economy was striving to revive. The new variant has again pushed countries across the world to impose social and economic restrictions, and some places also locked down. COVID 19 during the past year and the year before that has, of course, disrupted the supply chains. It has altered the global order. It has affected the relationships, the alliances, and it has also seen the emergence of new powers. It has affected the global health. So, in fact, the entire world witnessed a lot of change during these years. Now, what major changes did we see last year? How is it going to affect the geopolitics of the world this year? This is what we are going to look at this very first episode of the Ideas Factory. A very warm welcome to you, Harsh, and a very happy new year.
Happy New Year to you, Naghma.
Harsh, I would like to start by you actually analyzing what were the major global trends that we saw last year. We saw that the struggle for supremacy between the existing superpower, that was America, and its challenger, the China, has actually widened in all spheres, be it artificial intelligence, be it the technological warfare. China also seizing all opportunity that it could to establish that it was ideologically better than the US, the internal strife that we saw in US. So how did the global power really change or shift during the last year? And do you see it going forward this year?
And Naghma, it seems that a lot of the changes that were already in the offing before COVID-19 struck us have been certainly accelerated by this in the last year and a half. And now, as we enter another year with another strain, which is wreaking havoc at the moment around the world and even in India, I think it's fair to say that COVID-19 itself has been one of the biggest disruptors to the global order in ways that I don't think we had envisioned when it all began. So I think the larger global reality today looks very, very dynamic, because every single day is bringing a whole host of challenges. The crisis that started off as a health crisis is also now turning into a wealth crisis. There is a crisis of, there is an economic crisis around the world. Economies are struggling, and just when you thought economies are going to get back on track, economic activity is going to get back on track, another strain has struck us, and countries are recalibrating, what to do, how much to, what kind of restrictions to put in place, and there is a state society conflict brewing around this issue as well. We are seeing, for example, in Europe, people not abiding by the restrictions, protesting vociferously against restrictions, and almost a kind of an oppositional stance that is being taken, partly because I think of just the frustration of being in-house for the last 2 years, but also the way their economic activity is being hampered. So I don't think we have seen the end of it yet. But, of course, the virologists are talking about the fact that perhaps this might be the last strain and it will become an endemic, strain later on. But we don't know really. But what it has done is it has it has underscored the real challenge in global politics, which is that the contestation between the US and China, to which you alluded to, which always, great power politics is always at the heart of international geopolitical alignments and contradictions, that has become much sharper. And for the last 2 years, we have seen what is interesting is two different governments in Washington. Trump administration and then Biden administration, both taking more or less similar approach to China. Many, last year when Mr. Biden had come to office, many had expected that perhaps he will tone down the rhetoric and the stridency with which Washington is challenging China, but that has not happened. Washington has become even more, even Washington is articulating even more strongly its displeasure and is willing to go where perhaps Mr. Trump was not willing to go. For example, on the Uyghur issue on the issue of Xinjiang, and we know the diplomatic boycott of the Winter Olympics has been declared by Washington and a few other countries. So clearly, I think the fault lines are sharpening between the two powers, and its impact is being felt and will be felt in almost all spheres: economics, climate. Technology, the larger focus of alignments and partnerships. And I think for any country that is looking at the world today, this is going to be 2022 perhaps is going to be even more turbulent, because on the one hand you have the US-China contestation, but as we start this new year, we are also looking at Russia and the West contestation on Ukraine, which is equally potent and equally interesting.
Absolutely. The conflict between Russia and the West has also sharpened, and Russia still towards the East is also more visible. But when we look at the US, and as you pointed out, that the new Biden administration took charge, and then there were hope and people were expecting that there would be major changes. But except for the few executive orders in the first few days of Biden in office, not much has changed in terms of global policy. You pointed out the policy towards China, which has in fact continued from the past. Whatever was Trump's policy, in fact, it has sharpened. The fault lines have sharpened. Another thing that we see is the focus of Biden administration is also the Indo-Pacific, more to contain China probably, or the rising China, the rise of China, which actually we saw that it consolidated during the pandemic year, while most of the country and the rest of the world was struggling and they were in turmoil. The Chinese economy, of course, went up and down, but it was more or less better than the rest of the world. Also, China took this opportunity to reiterate its supremacy and how East is supreme or better than the West. So focus on Indo-Pacific continues. How do you see the Indo-Pacific region in this coming year, the balance of power there?
Well, I think Indo-Pacific, as many people have pointed out, certainly, and it has become a cliche now to say that it is the center of gravity of global politics and economics, and because it is the center of gravity now, I think the contestations in the Indo-Pacific are going to be much sharper, and that is what, in fact, last year, one of the big, I think, highlights of last year was that how this quadrilateral security dialogue, the so-called Quad, really came on its own. Two leaders level summit in a year. It's quite unprecedented for any platform that was, before 2021 was actually struggling to come to terms with itself. So really what Biden administration has done is to give a Quad a new momentum, and with that, its Indo-Pacific policy a new sharpness, because I think they have largely carried on from the Trump administration's free and open Indo-Pacific outlook. But where Trump was not investing or was not really keen on investing in multilateral or plurilateral initiatives, Biden administration has really picked up, taken up that challenge and is looking at Quad as the centerpiece of their larger Indo-Pacific approach. How far it succeeds, whether it will work or not, remains to be seen. But if you look at the agenda that the Quad leaders have charted out for themselves, it is quite ambitious. And I think in a way which is quite clever. They are not making it entirely about China. They are making it about the provision of certain kinds of public goods, for example, vaccines, health, infrastructure, connectivity, trade. I think those issues which the Indo-Pacific countries, the regional states care about, and where China has been able to make a dent and has been able to convince various countries in the region that it is a better provider of these goods than perhaps Quad countries or other countries like America. And I think there the initiative of Quad, there the approach of Quad makes a lot of sense, and they will have to deliver fast. I think 2022 in particular is an important deadline for vaccine diplomacy, where they want to scale up vaccine supplies not only in the Indo-Pacific but around the world. And I think the world will be watching, given the tenuous nature of this virus, to see how effective Quad is in managing that particular challenge. And if it is able to do that well, then I think that as an alternative, it can emerge. But I think largely, as Indo-Pacific had been the focal point of a lot of global attention, along with Quad, we saw a lot of controversy around AUKUS. Australia, US, UK, submarine deal, which was slightly on the hard side of the trilateral relationship in the Indo-Pacific. But I think that is going to be the nature of the game, with new minilaterals, new plurilaterals emerging in the region, because there is a void of institutions in the region, in the Indo-Pacific at the moment. And China, as you pointed out, is actually not leaving any stone unturned in shaping the regional architecture to its own advantage, whether by coercing other countries, or by becoming a supplier of public goods like infrastructure and connectivity. So I think this is going to be a very, very crucial time for those who want to challenge China, those who want to stand up to China, to see that there are alternatives in place that can deliver. And I think that contestation in the Indo-Pacific is going to get even sharper. And with Biden administration focused on the Quad in particular and on China, I think this I think approach, this contest has just about begun in the region. So I think 2021 will also give us some insight into what those developments that happened in 2021, how they fructify and how they move forward.
Yeah, how they fructify in 2022 now, this is what we are going to see. But as you pointed out, the trends are very, very clear. We look at how the year 2021 was. And as you say, the Harsh, that the fault lines are sharpening, and also in the Indo-Pacific. The problem that you see now is for the countries. Which camp do they join? Are they as the world again turning to be bipolar? Because the US and China conflict or competition, or the fault line between the two widening, has also put pressure on the global order, or it's also kind of pressurizing the countries to balance between the two. So if we look at India too, India is seen as a natural ally of the US, and Russia still towards China, or rather China getting close to Russia. But at the same time, the Indian-Russian relationship has history, and also it's really pragmatic now. We've seen the visit of President Putin, signing of deals, the S-400 and all of that. But do you see that there is this pressure on countries like India to balance between the two?
Indeed, I think whenever you have a structural environment where you have two blocks emerging like the ones that seem to be emerging at the moment, there is a lot of pressure on countries that want to retain their strategic autonomy. And I think what is interesting, however, is if you look at, for example, the Indo-Pacific, a lot of the heavy lifting has been done by the so-called middle powers, right? Australia, Japan, India, and certain countries in ASEAN. They've actually pushed, the strategic map of the region in a direction that perhaps both China and the US would not have done on their own. Now, especially US, because US, there was a lot of criticism, there was a lot of concern that US is tilting inwards, that US is becoming more and more inward looking, that because of the domestic dysfunctionality in the US, where the polarization remains very, very high, there is hardly any appetite in terms of cohesive pushback against China. There, I think the role of countries like India, Australia, Japan, and Southeast Asian nations have been quite critical in giving this message to the US that they are important for them. It is important for the US to engage, and it is important for the US to take a leadership role in the region. So I think middle powers have been able to carve out a space for themselves, even in this very, very polarized regional and global order. But I think where the pressure is only going to increase in the future is, as you point out, when you have a problem like the one that is being witnessed at the moment, the US camp or the Western camp versus Russia, for example, I think the pressures become very, very serious. And India, I think, in some ways has so far managed it quite effectively. Because if you look at the last year, 2021, it started with lots of differences between India and Russia. Russians were quite vocal on Indo-Pacific. They were quite vocal on Quad, where they were taking positions which were very similar to the Chinese positions. But by the end of the year, if you see Putin's visit, a lot of these wrinkles have been sorted out. Because I think what happened in between was Afghanistan, and the realization that Americans moving out of Afghanistan actually leaves the region very, very vulnerable. And for the regional states like Russia, Central Asia, India, the importance of engaging with each other, the importance of working together in making the Taliban regime more responsible. I think that pressure is already visible. That pressure is visible in the way the India and Russia are engaging with each other. India's outreach to Russia and Russia's outreach to India is also equally significant. So I think that balancing that India has been able to do between Russia and the West so far has worked. Now, how far that will continue and how effective this will be as the fault lines sharpen, that remains to be seen. But I think so far India has been able to give this sense to Russia and give this sense to the West that India is into what are called issue-based coalitions. India wants to work with like-minded partners on issues of convergence, and India is not willing to abandon partners. So, like S-400 deal, for example, is a good, is a good example where India has stood up to the West and said that this is not only important for Indo-Russian relations, it is also important for India's own capability building.
Yeah, of course, and while the relation with of Russia with the West continues to decline, and there is a tilt towards the east that we see the standoff at the Ukrainian border that also continues. We've also witnessed a consolidation of authoritarian political system in Russia, so that continues, and in fact, the US has also probably made a statement about intervening if this problem continues in Ukraine. You pointed out, Harsh, about what's happened in Afghanistan and the hasty US withdrawal and how has it affected the entire region. Of course, countries like Russia, India, for these countries, it's a major concern. But we've also seen a flurry of activities in the Middle East, the diplomacy there, the visits there, the countries coming together, the regional alliances getting actually stronger, the Abraham Accord actually fructifying in many ways, Israel's visit to UAE. So this is also, we can say, the result of what happened in Afghanistan and the declining role of America in Afghanistan, that these countries have been, do you think, compelled to come together?
Yes, I think there is a excuse me, there is a great concern in the region about the whole structure that has operated there for so long, with America being the central pillar around which the regional architecture has evolved. Now, what has happened in Afghanistan has actually put a lot of pressure on regional states to carve out their own responses to this challenge. And America is, whichever way America moves, there are clear indications that America is prioritizing Indo-Pacific over the Middle East. For a long time, Middle East had been this very important priority for the US, but if you see the statements, if you see the policy postures, if you see the military posture, it's very clear where America is going to go over the next few years and what American priorities are going to be. So it is not surprising that regional stakeholders in the Middle East are shaping their own responses. And in an interesting way, another quad in the Middle East, India, US, Israel, and the UAE, a very unusual sort of an arrangement, but I think an arrangement that speaks to the challenges of our times and to the way the Middle Eastern architecture is shifting. The Abraham Accords and the fact that Israel and UAE are coming so close tells you another story about the region, that it is how it is reaching out, how it is trying to shape the 21st century realities, both economic as well as strategic. So I think India's role there is also going to be equally interesting and equally important. And India's engagement in that particular quad also signifies, I think, a certain ambition in India to play a role, I think, slightly bigger and slightly more formidable than it has played in the Middle East so far. So far, India had primarily been looking at Middle East through its bilateral relations, whether it is Israel, whether it is the Arab Gulf countries, or whether it is Iran. I think today India is willing to expand and to look at the region more holistically through a regional framework, and therefore this quadrilateral framework that is being evolved, I think, gives you a certain sense of India's priorities in the region.
Absolutely. Now, to sum up, Harsh, if we look at what has happened in the past and the global trends that we discussed, if we look at some of the big questions vis-a-vis India, the India-China relationship. We also look at what's happening in the Middle East and India's role there. How do you think is the balance of power between countries going to change in this coming year? What are the major trends that you can actually point at?
Naghma, I think the most important challenge and most important issue for India remains what it was last year, which is China. And in a sense, that challenge has been with us now since 2020, because the way Chinese power has manifested itself, the way it has pushed us and provoked us and poked us on the border along multiple fronts, I think is a testament to the power disparity between India and China, and that is being reflected in various ways. Every day you hear a news story in the media about what Chinese are doing on their side of the border, what they're building, what kind of infrastructure they are creating. So I don't think that pressure is going to go away anytime soon, and India is already living with that pressure every day. So I think the opportunity and the challenge for India is, how do we carve out external partnerships that help us in managing this Chinese challenge, and also how do we build our own capacities in ways, sometimes with the help of other countries, but also sometimes with things where we are developing our own innate domestic capabilities. So I think that challenge is going to be the fundamental prism through which Indian foreign policy and security policy is likely to evolve in 2022, much like it did in 2021.
Absolutely. So we will keep a track of all those developments on the coming episode of the Ideas Factory. Thank you so much, Harsh, for that analysis. And we would like to remind our viewers that you can send in your questions, definitely. We'll take a few questions on the next episode. Thank you so much.